Guys, due to the overwhelming positive reviews that I've been hearing on the new Blade Runner, I thought it would be only fair if I reviewed the first one. So here we go. Today we're talking about Blade Runner 1982, also known as the first Blade Runner. So Blade Runner, the first one, follows our story in the future, 2 years from now, in 2019, which back in 1982 was a long ways away. But it takes place in Los Angeles, 2019, and it follows a Blade Runner, which is the futuristic version of Cops, and a Blade Runner officer named Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford. And his job basically is to any rogue replicant, which are basically these robot type things that look like human, they act like human, but they're not human, essentially. And his job as a Blade Runner is that any rogue replicant that's out, like, causing trouble or whatever, his job is to put them down, also known as retire them, also. And that's essentially what the movie is about. Now, these replicants are built by this corporation called the Tyrell Organization, and they're used to go and colonize other worlds for Earth or something like that. And I guess 4 of these replicants come back and try to dismantle the Tyrell Organization. It's up to Rick Deckard to sort of like solve this mystery and figure out how to dismantle these replicants. So first thing I'm going to say about this movie is that it is hands down beautiful. The way that Ridley Scott builds this whole world and how he makes this futuristic world presentable to the audience is just marvelous, and I love it. Now, the actual story, it took me a couple times to actually figure it out because the story moves at a very slow pace, but also a lot of stuff is happening at the same time. I mean, it starts out with this interview with a replicant and someone else, and you're trying to figure out what this is because apparently humans have a way of identifying replicants from humans by using this sort of test thing, which follows into one of the Tyrell Organization's secretary, who's actually a replicant, but with the imprinted memories of the guy who created the Tyrell Organization, Mr. Tyrell's niece's memories implanted inside her. And so it's kind of an identity crisis whether or not she's a replicant or not. So a little confusing story there. It took me a couple times, but I think Harrison Ford gives a great performance in the movie. It's one of his earlier films. He's coming off the height of Indiana Jones and the very first Star Wars at this point. So he's a well-known, established actor at this point, also American Graffiti. But yeah, he's well-established by this point. Ridley Scott is coming off the success of Alien, so he's got that sci-fi momentum going behind him as well. You also have Sean Young, who up till this point, the only other movie I had ever seen her in was Ace Ventura, the very first one. So it was interesting to see her in this movie. But for the most part, just the whole mystery of just who's a replicant and who's a human is really fascinating, and I like that whole idea. Harrison Ford's character just kind of just throws himself at this replicant, I feel, though, like halfway through the movie, though, where she's just trying to identify whether or not she's a replicant or a human and everything. He's just like, kiss me. And I kind of felt like it was a little out-of-body scene, just like, okay, so now you're just throwing yourself at the replicant. And then, like, they just run away together towards the end of the movie, which I find interesting. Now, the version that I watched, which is the final cut, adds on like a couple of extra minutes onto the actual movie, the original one, which was released and everything. So I'm not sure how that version differs from this one, but I just got this one because I guess it feels more complete. But the ending is essentially the same, just with an added extra couple minutes of scenes here and there. But like I said, the hardest thing is the story and just trying to get into it. But once you have it all, it's an interesting story, and it's a great example of what a sci-fi noir film really should be. And being this early in the 1980s when this movie came out, it just seemed really needed, and it's a great representation of the times and everything. So now that I've seen this, I look forward to seeing Blade Runner 2049 definitely way more. Now, obviously, after you have seen this review, I'm going to put down in the link below 3 short movies, or 3 short, I guess, short movies that basically set up for Blade Runner 2049. You can watch the first one, watch my review on it, obviously, and then watch these short films, which will sort of fill in the gaps and sort of give you an idea of what to expect as you watch the new Blade Runner, which, like I said, is getting great reviews and everything, and apparently has some sort of twist in it which no one is to expect seeing. So it's kind of like a little interesting tidbit to get right before we get into more of the fall movies that are coming out up till when we get to eventually Star Wars. So you can definitely expect a review on Blade Runner 2049. I hope you enjoyed this one on Blade Runner. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Adios.